If I had spoken the truth that day, my daughter might have died in that house. That's the sentence I've tried to forget for a year. But on the afternoon of November 12, 2025, when Seattle's cold pressed a thin layer of silver frost against my window, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. I stood alone in my small living room holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Outside, the rain fell in thin threads, disappearing the moment they touched the stone walkway. 1 year had passed since the Christmas Eve when I finally confessed everything. But the echo of that night, cold, sharp, and patient, still lingered behind me like a shadow refusing to leave. And then, the doorbell rang. A slow, heavy chime, the kind of knock from someone who already knows your heartbeat is out of rhythm. I unlocked the door, pulled it open, and saw Emily. Not Emily in her wedding gown at Lake Union. Not the ambitious, smiling Emily who let Ryan hold her hand for the camera. Before me stood a 30-year-old woman trembling under the rain, her eyes swollen red as if she'd cried her way through the night. "Dad?" Her voice cracked like broken glass. "I don't have anywhere else to go." She handed me her phone. The screen was still lit, showing the last message Ryan had sent. "We both know you're worthless without the money. Not she, not they. You." A threat disguised as a sentence. A truth stripped to the bone. And proof, painful, merciless proof that I had been right to stay silent. Emily stood there, shaking the wind cutting through her soaked coat. And I, a 67-year-old man who lived a quiet, decent life, knew this was the moment I had feared most. The moment I would have to reopen the memories I had buried a year ago. The moment James Whitmore's final promise, the one he pressed into my hands on his deathbed, returned to demand its fulfillment. My name is John Whitaker, 67 years old, retired engineer, widower, a man who tried to live kindly, until I was forced to hide $19 million from my own daughter. Not out of greed, not out of control, but because if I spoke too soon, the people lurking in the shadows would have reached her before she knew how to defend herself. That's what James told me on the day he drew his final breath. That day in November 2023 looked exactly like today, bitter, piercing rain, the kind that cuts through even Seattle's thickest coats. The funeral was held at the old church on Queen Anne Hill. James Whitmore could have had the grandest ceremony money could buy, but he didn't want that. He only allowed the people who truly belonged there, a few longtime partners, old investment colleagues, my daughter, and me. I sat in the third pew watching the walnut casket rest beneath a tall stained glass window. The violet and sapphire light spilled over his portrait, making his face look strangely warm for a man gone cold. James wasn't just my former father-in-law. He was the man who once told me a man becomes dangerous only when he realizes he has nothing left to lose. I never imagined those words would apply to me. When the service ended, attorney Susan Blake called me and Emily to a small room behind the sanctuary. There the will was opened, simple, direct, without flourish. Emily Whitaker, daughter of my late wife Linda, and granddaughter of James, was to inherit the entire Whitmore family trust, worth $19 million. But under two conditions. 1. The trust would open when she turned 30 on June 30th, 2024. 2. She could not marry within 1 year of James's death. Emily simply nodded. She thought it was her grandfather's way of keeping her safe from impulsive love. But I felt something tighten in my chest. Susan placed another envelope on the table addressed to me. "James left this for you, John." I opened it. And read the words that have followed me into every dream since. "If you reveal the truth too soon, they will come. Protect Emily even if she becomes angry with you." I looked up. Him. Who does he mean by they? Susan exhaled slowly. "You knew James. When he used the word they, he meant someone dangerous enough that he never said their name." My hands went cold. My fingertips tingled like ice. That was the first time in my life I felt fear without knowing who I was afraid of. That night, after everyone had left the church, I stayed behind under the long stone archway. Rain slid across the dark marble steps like silver wires. Emily walked past me, wiping her eyes, still grieving her grandfather, unaware that his death had just opened the door to a war she never asked for. And then I saw her. A woman in a deep red coat, the color of fresh blood under candlelight, standing near the edge of the courtyard. Blonde hair curled perfectly, makeup sharp enough for a movie premiere, not a funeral. She didn't cry. She didn't bow her head. She didn't greet a single person. She only watched Emily. Watched her for a long time. Then she turned to me and smiled. A smile so cold, I felt the back of my neck prickle. I didn't know who she was, or why she was there, or why her eyes followed my daughter like she knew every piece of her future. But months later, I learned. Her name was Vivian Brooks, and she was the answer to the question James had left for me. Who were they? That night when I returned home, I unlocked the hidden safe behind my bookcase, an old steel box, paint faded, secured with 2 mechanical locks. I placed James's envelope inside, then the original will. Closed it. Sealed it with the wooden stamp James once used in the 1990s. I didn't tell Emily. Didn't explain. Didn't open my mouth. I only knew one thing: if the people James feared were truly out there, I had to stay silent until the exact moment it was safe. Not earlier, not later, not one day off. What I didn't know was, that moment would come far sooner than I expected. And it would begin the day a man named Ryan Brooks walked through my front door, with eyes that knew too much, a smile that knew too little, and an ambition larger than any soul I had ever met. I didn't know who they were, not until the day Ryan walked into my home. Some people don't knock when they enter your life. They don't ask permission. They simply slip in carrying something you don't notice until it's already sitting in your living room. Ryan Brooks walked into my home on a cold afternoon in early January 2024, when Seattle was still wrapped in shoulder-stinging wind and a dull gray fog that crawled over the pavement like steel. I remember that moment clearly. Emily stood at my doorway first, her shoulders shivering from the wind, but her eyes glowing in a way I hadn't seen for years. Hope. Or at least, what she believed was hope. Behind her stood Ryan. He wore a gray cashmere turtleneck, expensive enough to impress, understated enough to avoid suspicion, the kind of outfit chosen by men who want to look effortless. His smile appeared the instant Emily turned toward him. A perfectly timed, well-practiced smile meant to signal safety. But the second she looked away from him and toward me, that smile faded just a little. Not enough for her to notice, but enough for me to see something behind it. Something cold, rigid, metallic. "Dad," Emily said, voice light, almost excited. "I want you to meet Ryan." Ryan stepped forward and extended a hand. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Whitaker. Emily's told me a lot about you." I shook his hand. Warm grip, but firm, too firm. Not a greeting, a measurement. The kind of handshake used to test how easily the other man would break. I didn't comment. I just smiled. Sometimes silence is the only way to see a person clearly. Dinner. Emily had set the table with more care than usual. A new tablecloth, the good plates, even candles placed in glass jars. She wanted everything to be perfect. And Ryan, of course, played the part of the perfect man without missing a beat. He talked about the small real estate company he ran in Queen Anne, successful enough to sound respectable, modest enough to sound humble. He asked me about my engineering years. He smiled at the right moments. He nodded at the right moments. If I weren't a cautious man, I might have mistaken him for a kind one. But midway through dinner, he set his glass down gently like someone laying a knife on a table and asked, "You worked with James Whitmore, right? I've heard he made some brilliant real estate investments." His tone was casual. His question wasn't. I answered. James was the man of precision. Ryan chuckled. I figured. A trust as large as the Whitmore Trust must hold a lot of clever moves. Emily froze for half a second, just long enough for me to see it. I changed the subject, but Ryan didn't take his eyes off the wooden cabinet behind me, a cabinet he couldn't possibly know held anything. Yet he looked at it like he could sense what mattered most inside. I recognized that look. Back in 1998, in a conference room full of desperate men, I saw that exact same expression, the look of someone who doesn't ask, "Does this belong to me?" but rather, "When will this belong to me?" It was then I remembered something James once said. The most dangerous people are the ones who smile when they see someone else's money. After dinner, while Emily washed dishes in the kitchen, Ryan followed me out to the front porch to retrieve his coat. The night was brutally cold. Our breaths turned to mist. He stood a little too close behind me. Then he spoke low enough that Emily wouldn't hear. "Once I get the right opportunity, she won't have to live as modestly as you do." I didn't turn around, didn't react, didn't give him the satisfaction of an expression. A man my age has 3 choices when faced with a sentence like that. 1, get angry. 2, laugh it off. 3, remember it. I chose the third. Ryan walked back inside to fetch his coat, leaving behind a faint trail of cologne, a mixture of luxury and artificial confidence. The first sign. After they left, I began clearing the table. But when my eyes drifted toward the office door, I froze. On the metal doorknob, a faint smear of oil. A fingerprint. Not mine, not Emily's. Fresh. I didn't open the door. Not yet. James had taught me something long ago: when in doubt, step back. So I stepped outside to breathe. And that's when I saw it. A black SUV parked across the street. Lights off. Tinted windows. No temporary plate. Engine silent. But someone was inside. Not watching. Not moving. Not leaving. Just sitting there. Still. Unnaturally still. Like a shadow waiting for something to shift. I didn't call the police. The SUV wasn't breaking any laws. It was parked legally. No threats. No actions. But in Seattle, no one sits in a dark SUV for half an hour without a reason. I didn't know the Brooks family yet, but I knew one thing. They knew me long before I knew them. I went back inside, wiped the fingerprint from the safe handle, and locked both the office door and the basement door. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room and listened to the rain, feeling something move silently through my life, light as breath, heavy as a warning. Emily calls. Near midnight, my phone rang. "Dad." Her voice was thin, tremulous, like someone speaking through fog. "What do you think of Ryan?" That question sank into my chest like a needle. I wanted to say, "You don't know him. You didn't see his eyes when he mentioned your grandfather. You didn't hear his voice when he stood behind me." But instead I asked, "Are you happy, sweetheart?" There was a long pause. "I think so," she whispered. And there is no sentence more terrifying than a woman saying, "I think so," when she's falling for the wrong man. I hung up and stared into the dark glass of the window. Something was forming a crack so small you'd barely notice it. But whatever waited behind it wasn't light. Greed doesn't speak. It looks straight at whatever is being guarded. And that night, for the first time, I felt someone staring at the place where I kept the most important thing in my life. Not the safe, not the cabinet, but my daughter. January 2024. The night Ryan walked through my door became the last quiet night of my life. Everything afterward was only the beginning. There are people who walk into your life wearing a smile, but leave wounds you don't recognize until it's far too late. Vivian Brooks was one of those people. I met her on a February afternoon in 2024, one of those Seattle days so cold your breath turns to mist, and the seagulls fly low over Lake Union as if the entire sky were sinking under the weight of bad news. Emily had begged me for a week. "Dad, Ryan really wants you to meet his mom. She's important to him." Could you just come this once? For me, I looked into her eyes that had only recently regained some stability after the first weeks of living with Ryan. I didn't want to burden her, and more importantly, I wanted to see the Brooks family clearly. So I agreed. It felt like walking into a room where I already knew someone was waiting in the dark. The first meeting. The restaurant Vivian chose sat on the 19th floor of a glass tower in South Lake Union. Luxurious quiet lit with soft gold, like a movie set built for elegance and performance. I arrived 10 minutes early. The server led me to a table by the window overlooking the city. Lights shimmered on the lake below, broken, scattered, ripped apart by the wind. I sat down, exhaled slowly, and told myself, if this is the person James feared, I'll know the moment I see her. And I did. Within the first 3 seconds. Vivian approached the table with the calm precision of someone who had stood behind dozens of political campaigns. Soft blonde curls, a deep red coat, heels clicking sharply like metal striking metal. But it wasn't the beauty. It wasn't the elegance. It was her eyes. They weren't the eyes of a woman meeting her future in-law. They were the eyes of someone calculating, someone who measured value not by character, but by usefulness. Emily beamed. Dad, this is Ryan's mother, Mrs. Vivian Brooks. Vivian offered her hand. John Whitaker. At last we meet. Her voice was warm, her smile polite. But when I shook her hand, I felt the unmistakable presence of a person already crafting a strategy, waiting for the right moment to unfold it. I didn't speak. I simply nodded. We sat down. Vivian didn't ask a single question about my health, my work, my past, or my family. Not one. Her questions were all of one flavor. How long did you know James Whitmore? Were you involved in his financial decisions? Do you still keep in contact with any of his old partners? These were not social questions. They were probes testing the strength of my walls brick by brick. I answered calmly, slowly, saying less than she wanted, watching her more than she watched me. Then she set her wineglass down, tilted her head, and said quietly, deliberately, James Whitmore was very good at hiding financial secrets. The air around the table chilled. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. She stared at me without blinking, waiting to see if her words struck anywhere sensitive. I stayed silent. Any word I said would become a piece on her chessboard. Emily gave a nervous laugh. Mom? Dad never dealt with Grandpa's finances like that. Vivian cut her off gently, still smiling, but her eyes were sharper than the edge of a blade. Oh, sweetheart. Men are always modest about what they know, especially when it comes to family money. Emily flushed, not embarrassed, confused. She didn't know what Vivian was implying. But I did. At that exact moment, I remembered James's envelope, his handwritten warning. If you reveal the truth too soon, they will come. And with the way Vivian said his name, I realized I had just seen them. I excused myself to wash my hands. Vivian followed, her heels tapping against the polished floor, but she slipped into the women's restroom. Before she closed the door, she glanced back at me. A short glance, but full of calculation. A glance that said, you know something, and I will find out what it is. I washed my hands, slowly piecing together all the fragments in my mind. When I returned to the table just before I reached my chair, I heard Vivian whisper to Ryan. Her voice was soft as breath, but sharp enough that I knew she wanted me to hear, June will come sooner than you think. June, the month Emily would turn 30, the month the trust unlocked, the month $19 million would legally become hers. A coldness shot down my spine like someone pouring a bucket of ice water straight into my bones. No more doubt, no more guessing, no more vague intuition. I knew exactly who they were, the Brooks family, and Vivian was their leader. When I returned to my seat, Vivian smiled as if she hadn't just declared war behind that smile. Do you like the salmon, John? I looked at her, long enough for her to sense what I saw behind her flawless exterior. Elegance, yes. Confidence, yes. Charm, yes. But underneath, a dangerous woman. Dangerous because she was smart. Dangerous because she had motive. Dangerous because she didn't bother hiding her motive. I replied quietly, "Any dish tastes good, as long as it's served at the right time." Vivian tilted her head, just slightly, but her lips twitched the smallest sign of irritation. Ryan sat beside her, pretending nothing was wrong, but his finger tapped the edge of his chair, quick, rhythmic, anxious. Emily, of course, didn't understand why the air between us was freezing enough to turn water solid. When dinner ended, Ryan escorted Emily to the car first. Vivian remained. She studied me for a few silent seconds, then said, "I look forward to seeing more of you, John." Her voice was velvet, but I heard the steel beneath it. "So do I answered. Nothing is more important than knowing exactly who stands on which side. She smiled, a small, tight smile. Not goodwill. Recognition. As if she had just confirmed a suspicion. A secret she intended to dig out of me piece by piece. Aftermath. When I got home that night, I turned on the lights in my living room and stood still, absorbing the quiet. And I knew with the instinct only an aging man can trust that Vivian Brooks hadn't come to meet me. She had come to evaluate me, measure me, study the borders of my life. And her target wasn't me, it was Emily. I sat down, exhaled deeply, and stared at the closed door of my office where James's envelope and the original will rested in the old safe. Safe, but no longer untouched. From the day I met Vivian Brooks, I understood why James had feared them so much. He left me a final warning. And I knew the real battle had just begun. There are ceremonies made to celebrate love, and then there are ceremonies made to hide a plan. Emily and Ryan's wedding fell into the second category. I knew it the moment I stepped out of the taxi and saw the Lakeside Hotel at Lake Union lit up like a Hollywood movie premiere, the kind of extravagance that had no place in the life of a small real estate founder recovering from bankruptcy. Rows of lights ran along the dock. White roses blanketed the stairway. 3 drones circled overhead for aerial footage. Guests dressed like VIPs, people I'd never seen before. Luxury cars lined up like a political fundraiser. A lot of money. Too much money. And none of it my daughter's. I stood at the edge of the scene, watching the spectacle unfold, hearing Vivian's words from our first meeting echo like metal scraping stone. June will come sooner than you think. It was April, just 2 months until Emily turned 30, 2 months until the trust opened. When I walked into the lobby, it felt like stepping onto a film set, one where every smile was painted on, every gesture choreographed, every sparkle meant to distract from the script hidden behind the curtains. Emily rushed toward me. She looked beautiful, not with the glow of a loved woman, but with the fragile brightness of someone trying very hard to appear happy. "Dad, I'm so glad you made it." I put a hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" She hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Then she smiled, a smile I hadn't seen in months. "I'm okay, Dad, really." But her eyes told a different story. As we walked inside, I glanced through the glass doors. And there it was, the black SUV. The second appearance. Lights off. No temporary plates. No one stepping out. Just sitting in the corner of the parking lot, half hidden by shadows. A shiver crept down my spine. Not from cold, from the realization. Someone was watching us. Not by accident, not for the first time, but with intention. I looked away. It wasn't the moment to ruin my daughter's wedding with suspicion, but I knew this much. If that SUV showed up a third time, it would be no coincidence. The ceremony. The banquet hall was breathtaking, a high ceiling dripping with crystal chandeliers like waterfalls of light. Ryan emerged among the guests. Tuxedo, perfect smile, perfect steps, perfect. He led Emily to the dance floor amid applause. I stood near a corner table, not wanting to mix with people celebrating something they didn't understand. Then the MC announced, "Let's watch a slideshow of our lovely couple." A massive 4K screen lit up on stage. At first it was innocent. Emily as a toddler. Emily in the park. Emily graduating. I smiled softly until the 12th photo appeared. A photo I never knew anyone else had. A photo only Emily and I should have possessed. Our old wooden house, the one we lived in before I found stable work. Faded paint, leaking roof, broken porch. A past that belonged to us alone. And underneath the photo in bold white letters, where she came from. The room erupted in laughter. People whispered. Some nudged each other. I stood frozen. It felt like watching an old wound being torn open under bright lights. Emily's body stiffened. Her champagne glass slipped from her hand. Her eyes filled instantly. Shiny, hurt, humiliated. I looked at Ryan. He was smiling. Not widely, not cruelly, just enough to let me know he allowed this. He wanted this. I didn't wait for the slideshow to end. I walked out the side door into the quiet hallway where the lights were dimmer and the air easier to breathe. I stood there staring across Lake Union through the glass. Wind swept across the water, creating thin silver ripples. I tried to breathe steadily, but laughter from the ballroom leaked out, sharp, cutting, merciless. Then I smelled the perfume, expensive, overpowering, before I heard the heels. Vivian Brooks stood beside me. Not too close, not too far, just close enough to let her presence press in. "You left so early." Her voice was soft, cool, deliberate. I didn't respond. She tilted her head, looking at me through the glass reflection. "I understand, John. You're used to your smaller world. Seeing your daughter step into something better must feel overwhelming." I clenched my jaw. Vivian placed a hand on the glass railing. "But you should be proud, really. It's thanks to you, thanks to where she started, that she can enter the world she truly belongs to." It wasn't an insult. It was worse. It was a claim of ownership. A declaration that my daughter's life was now in her hands, not mine. I turned to her. "You think you know my daughter?" Vivian smiled. "I know her more than you realize, John. And I know exactly what's coming in June." June. The trust. The $19 million. I inhaled sharply. "I think you're misunderstanding something," Vivian cut in smooth as silk. "No. I'm not misunderstanding anything." She picked up a champagne flute from a nearby table and twirled it between her fingers as if weighing the worth of an object in a pawn shop. "My son is a smart man, John, and smart men do not let themselves come out empty-handed." She looked at me straight, deep, unblinking. "Prepare yourself. Money changes everything. And your daughter is just getting started." She walked away, leaving behind her perfume and a threat she didn't have to say aloud. The POA. I stepped outside into the back parking area to collect my thoughts. That's when I saw Ryan. He was standing with the event manager, not in the guest area, but in the staff-only section. He was signing documents. I slowed my steps, not to eavesdrop, but to understand. The top page read, "Power of Attorney Authorization. Event Contract. No groom uses a POA to pay for a wedding. No one. Unless he's used to controlling transactions through other people. Unless it's habit. Unless it's strategy." He signed the papers with speed, the same speed of someone who's done this 100 times. When he turned, our eyes met. 1 second. Still. Cold. Dark enough to swallow light. He tucked the papers into an envelope, nodded casually, and walked off. But I remembered every detail. Ryan Brooks liked POA. And people who use POA as a habit never use it for anything good. The night back home, I sat in the dark living room listening to the ticking clock and the wind cutting across the roof. And I knew more clearly than ever. My daughter had not walked into a marriage. She had walked into a transaction, a contract, a strategy. And Ryan Brooks wasn't the most dangerous one. His mother was. Vivian didn't want Emily. She wanted what stood behind Emily, the $19 million. and the Whitmore legacy. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and asked myself if James were alive, what would he tell me to do? But there was no answer. Only the single warning he left me in that envelope. They will come. And today, on my daughter's wedding day, they came. In the great battles of life, enemies rarely arrive with guns. They arrive with silence. With small changes we fail to notice. With questions that sound harmless. And by the time we recognize we're standing in the middle of a war, it's already too late. May 2024 was the month I realized the Brooks family wasn't just the concern James warned me about. They were financial predators, creatures who survive in the shadows cast by large inheritances, thriving off the trust of people who don't know they're being hunted. And my daughter was standing at the center of their circle. A visit to Queen Anne. Emily called in early May. "Dad, come see the new house." We finally finished unpacking. I drove to Queen Anne District on a Saturday morning. Quiet streets, steep hills, tall trees, million-dollar homes lined up like polished wooden boxes facing the city. Beautiful, but no beauty could quiet the unease rising in my chest. Not because of the house itself. The house was beautiful, too beautiful for Ryan's income. No, the unease came from something else. Nothing of Emily's was here. Not the old picture of the two of us. Not her bookshelf. Not the tiny cactus she'd kept alive since 2019. Not even the framed diplomas she used to hang proudly. Everything was new. Everything replaced. Everything matched one aesthetic, Ryan's aesthetic. Emily stepped out of the kitchen smiling too hard. "So what do you think, Dad? Pretty nice, right?" "Of course," I said, though. My voice came out lower than I expected. Ryan appeared behind her, one arm draped casually over her shoulder, the other twirling his car keys. "We just want Emily to have a better life," he said. "Everyone deserves a little luxury. People who speak like that never talk about kindness. They talk about power." We sat down for lunch. Emily talked about her job, but the spark in her voice had dimmed. I finally asked, "You're still going into work on time, right?" She gave a weak smile. "Mostly. But Ryan wants me to leave early sometimes so I can help him with a few expansion projects." I frowned. "What projects?" Emily looked down at her plate. "I'm not sure." Ryan cut in quickly. "Oh, just some small deals. People in the industry know each other." I glanced at Emily's hands. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring, a tiny detail, but important. Ryan changed the subject fast, like a man shielding something delicate and explosive. "The house shows its first crack." After lunch, I excused myself to wash my hands. In the guest bathroom, I saw a debit card on the shelf. Name Ryan Brooks, authorized user Emily Whitaker. Emily wasn't the account owner. She was the secondary user. My hands tightened around the sink. A coldness crept up my spine. When I returned to the living room, Ryan was on the phone in the backyard. Emily went to the kitchen. And that's when I saw it. A folder on Ryan's desk left open just enough to be seen by accident. Whitmore Trust Inquiry, pending verification. My heart stumbled. In the top corner was the logo of a financial advisory service, the kind used by scammers to fabricate documents, impersonate attorneys, and gather personal information about unsuspecting heirs. I asked Emily, "What's this?" She froze. "I don't know." Ryan asked a few things about Grandpa. I told him I didn't know anything except he left some things to Mom. I clenched my fist. Ryan walked in just then, speaking casually. "Oh, that. Just learning more about my wife's family, right?" He smiled. "Your daughter is my wife now, Mr. Whitaker. I have the right to know where she comes from." I answered quietly. "She comes from herself." His eyes flickered, a brief sign of irritation. He tried to hide with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Careful, Mr. Whitaker. I'm just preparing for the future. The future, his future. Or the future, $19 million Emily would inherit. The email. That night when I got home, I checked my email. One new message. The subject line was too perfect. Whitmore Legal Trust. Required confirmation. It asked me to confirm guardian information for Emily to ensure asset safety. Guardian information. There was no guardian requirement in James's trust. The trust opened automatically at age 30. I didn't click anything. Instead, I forwarded it to Eric, an old friend who used to handle cybersecurity at Boeing. It took him 40 minutes. John, this is fake. Not phishing to steal your password. Something more elaborate. My stomach sank. This email is designed to gather information about the trust air structure access points. Document types. The sender wants to create forged documents or legal requests. Then a second email from Eric John. The server this email came from was tied to a past real estate fraud case in Tacoma. The server owner's name starts with Ryan B. A chill surged through me, a cold so sharp it felt carved into my bones. I called Mark Jensen, a private investigator I'd worked with during a case back in 2015. Mark, I need everything you can find on a man named Ryan Brooks. He didn't ask why. Give me 48 hours. But he didn't need 48. He needed 12. John, you're not going to like this. Say it. He was sued in 2018 for real estate fraud in Pierce County. Not convicted, lack of evidence, but multiple small investors accused him of stealing funds. And the file I asked. Mark sighed. Sealed. Somebody powerful protected him. Only one name came to mind, Vivian Brooks. Mark continued. He changed his name in 2019. Used to be Ryan Bennett. Major bankruptcy that same year. I closed my eyes. A man who changes his name always has something to bury. The third visit. Close to 11 p.m. I stepped onto my porch to collect the mail. And I saw it. The SUV. The third time. Parked 50 meters down the street. Lights off. No temporary plates. No movement. But this time, the window was rolled down an inch. Just enough for me to see eyes. Watching me. I didn't approach. I didn't signal. I didn't call the police. They couldn't do anything about a car parked legally. I simply stood there staring into the dark interior. And the person inside stared back. 3 minutes. Exactly 3 minutes. Then the SUV pulled away. Not fast, not slow. Just enough to say, I see you. I'm watching. I stood there, hand trembling despite the still air. Some enemies attack with actions. Some with words. But the most dangerous enemies attack with presence. And that black SUV was presence made real. That night I finally understood something my heart had been trying to deny. Ryan didn't just want to dominate Emily. He wanted what she would inherit on June 30th, the $19 million in the Whitmore Trust. And he wasn't acting alone. Someone else stood behind him. Someone smart enough to never appear in the open. Vivian's words from the wedding replayed in my mind. My son never leaves himself at a disadvantage. I looked toward my office door, toward the hidden safe where James's envelope and the original documents still lay untouched. It was time to raise my guard, because once greedy men begin to move, they always leave traces. You just need to know how to see them. And I was seeing them all too clearly. Some phone calls change everything. The call I received from my daughter in June 2024 was one of those calls. It came at 11:12 p.m. when Seattle was drowning under a hard, relentless rain that sounded like handfuls of gravel being thrown against my windows. I was reviewing legacy documents about the Whitmore Trust when the phone buzzed. Emily's name flashed across the screen, and the first thing I felt wasn't surprise. It was fear. I answered. "Dad." Her voice shook like a leaf caught in violent wind. "Dad, I'm not safe. I shot up from my chair. Emily. What happened? Where are you home? But I signed something. I don't remember signing it. My hand gripped the edge of the desk to stay steady. What did you sign? I don't know. I don't remember. Dad, I'm scared. I didn't ask anything else. I didn't need to. I grabbed my keys. Lock the doors. Don't open for anyone. Don't touch anything. I'm on my way. Seattle felt like December that night, cold, sharp, metallic. Streetlights spread long yellow streaks across the rain-slicked pavement. Fog clung close to the ground. I drove up the steep Queen Anne hills like someone was chasing me. But the fear wasn't vague. It wasn't imagined. It was instinct. And a father's instinct is rarely wrong. I reached her house in 8 minutes. It was the only lit home on the block. Emily stood at the door, shaking so badly the doorframe rattled when she tried to open it. Her eyes were swollen, her hair drenched, her breath sharp and broken like someone running from something terrifying. I stepped inside. The house was dark except for a strange blue light glowing from the office desk. The laptop screen was open, illuminating the room in a ghostly, unnatural way. I moved slowly toward it, and I understood immediately what had terrified Emily. On screen, a $75,000 loan agreement, a full power of attorney transfer, both with Emily's signature, her exact signature, precise strokes, perfect alignment, flawless scan. Emily's voice cracked behind me. Dad, I swear I didn't sign it, I swear. She sounded like she was begging, afraid I wouldn't believe her. I turned, placed my hands on her shoulders. I believe you. She broke down into sobs, a sound that feels like someone squeezing your heart with their bare hands. I returned to the laptop. I didn't touch the mouse, didn't close any window, didn't disturb the screen. I only looked, and the truth stared back. The signature was copy-pasted from a JPEG, timestamps manually typed. The loan document was made from an outdated credit template leak used by shady lenders. Whoever did this wasn't a sophisticated hacker. He was something else, a document thief, a fabricator. A man skilled in forging lives on paper, and only one person in this story fit that profile. Ryan. Ryan arrives drunk but dangerous. The door flew open, wind and rain bursting into the living room. Ryan staggered in drenched reeking of alcohol, but his eyes were sober enough that every instinct in me went on alert. He looked at Emily, crying, then at me. Well, look who's here. Mr. Whitaker. He said it as if I'd interrupted his evening entertainment. What did you do? I asked. My voice came out colder than I expected. Ryan laughed. Not a full laugh. A quiet, entertained laugh, the kind men make when they think they've already won. He tossed his car keys onto the desk. They skidded, hitting the corner of the laptop. She signed it. Don't make this dramatic. Emily didn't sign anything. He laughed louder. This time the contempt was unmistakable. She doesn't even know what she signed. That wasn't a drunk man talking. That was a man speaking freely because he believed no one could stop him. Why did you need her to sign a POA? Why not? He shrugged. If she doesn't know, she can't complain. Her money, her life. I'm just managing it for her. My hands curled into fists, nails cutting into my palm. I'm calling the police, I said. Ryan slid into the couch like he owned the place. Go ahead. You think I'd leave fingerprints? But sure, if you want to turn a family matter into a legal one, be my guest. He was right about one thing. I didn't have proof he forced Emily to sign. Not enough for police action. But I had something else. Before entering the house, I'd pressed record on my phone, and the file in my coat pocket now held, "She doesn't even know what she signed." It was our first real evidence. Proof he knew what he was doing was wrong. I turned to Emily. Let's go. Her voice trembled. Dad, I'm scared. I know. We walked out the back door. Ryan didn't follow. He just watched with the quiet satisfaction of a hunter letting his prey run. Because he knows the cage is still around them. Rain hammered the roof, the ground, the car. Seattle felt like it was splitting in two. I placed Emily into my car, but before shutting the door, I remembered something. Her coat was still inside. I ran back to grab it. And that's when I froze. In Ryan's office on the wall beside his desk hung a map. Not a street map, not a city map. A map with 3 red circles drawn in thick marker. 1. My house. 2. Emily's house. 3. Attorney Susan Blake's office. I stared at it, rain echoing like death tapping at the windows. And the truth hit me with brutal clarity. Ryan wasn't watching Emily. He was watching me. He was watching the safe in my home. He was watching the lawyer who held James's documents. Emily wasn't the prize. She was the bridge. The real target, the $19 million Whitmore Trust. Not a marriage, not a home, not a family. Ryan married my daughter for money, and he would do anything to get it. I snapped a photo of the map, 3 seconds, no more. Then heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. No more time. I ran out, shut the door, locked the car, and we sped off into the storm without looking back. The longest night. Emily fell asleep on my sofa, exhausted, still trembling. I pulled a blanket over her and sat beside the window. Rain struck the glass in hard, uneven rhythms like whispers from the past knocking to be remembered. I pressed play on my phone. Ryan's voice came through the speaker, slow, arrogant, merciless. She doesn't even know what she signed. It wasn't just a sentence. It was the growl of a predator who had smelled money. It was a confession from a man mapping his path to someone else's inheritance. Seattle's lights blurred behind the rain as I stared out into the night. Everything Ryan had done tonight was only the first stage of a plan. A plan built long before Emily ever met him. A plan designed by someone even more patient, even more calculating. Someone like Vivian Brooks. I turned off the lights. The room sank into darkness. But darkness wasn't the thing to fear anymore. The real danger was what was moving toward us quietly, hour by hour. There are doors we walk through all our lives without ever seeing what's behind them. And then there are doors that once opened, we can never go back from. In July 2024, I stepped through a door like that. A door leading straight into the shadows of the Brooks family. The morning after the storm. The morning after that terrible night in the rain, Mark Jensen, former private detective, came to my house with a cup of coffee and an expression that suggested none of this surprised him. "Is Emily okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Okay. For now. She's sleeping." Mark crossed his arms, leaning against my kitchen counter. "I reviewed everything you sent me. The loan agreement, the fake POA, the phishing emails." "John, Ryan Brooks isn't small time. I need to know who he is," I said. "All of him." Mark exhaled. "Then prepare yourself. People like him always leave a dirty trail. He didn't promise me answers. He warned me about them. But I had no choice." 3 days later. The file Mark called. "Meet me at my old office. Bring a notebook." I arrived at 8 a.m. His office sat on a mezzanine floor in an old industrial building. Foggy glass windows, cold neon lights flickering over a scratched wooden desk. He placed a thick folder in front of me. "John, you need to see this." I opened the first page. Bankruptcy file, 2018. Ryan Bennett. Ryan's old name, Ryan Bennett. Assets almost none. Debt over $300,000 from failed real estate ventures. Notes suspected fraudulent activities, insufficient evidence for prosecution. My stomach tightened. Mark pointed at the next sheet. Name change. Bennett. Brooks, 2019. Reason listed, image rebranding. Mark scoffed. No one changes their name to improve their image, if their image wasn't in pieces. Then he handed me the third document. A police system scan, blurry but readable. Investigation report. Coercive control. No charges filed. I looked at Mark. Explain. Mark spoke quietly like he didn't want Emily to hear. Coercive control is psychological abuse, financial isolation, social isolation, forced signatures. A woman reported him in 2020. What happened? She withdrew the complaint right before trial. Why? Mark raised an eyebrow. John, a man like Ryan with a mother like Vivian getting someone to withdraw a complaint is not difficult. The room felt smaller, the air felt thinner. My heart felt heavy like something was lowering itself onto my chest. Mark turned to the fourth file. This is the dangerous part. He slid a business registration list across the desk. On line 7, Brooks Asset Holdings, LLC owner, Vivian Brooks Activity Asset Management and Advisory, Suspicion Shell Company. Mark said, no employees, no physical office, no working phone. 0 declared revenue. But, he tapped the page. Constant incoming and outgoing transfers. What kind of transfers? Mark sighed. Funds from shady real estate deals. Transfers from projects Ryan mentioned to Emily. And John, this is the part you must hear: money moved using forged or coerced POA documents. My grip tightened on the edge of the chair. So Vivian built a shell company to clean up Ryan's operations. Mark nodded. When they need to move money, hide it, or make paperwork look legitimate, they use the shell company. It makes even fake contracts look real. My mind flashed back to that night in the rain, the loan agreement, the forged POA, the signature copy-pasted. Not an accident, not drunken impulse, a system. Polished, practiced, long-running, not designed to control Emily, designed to reach something behind her. The $19 million Whitmore Trust. Then the call. Came the next afternoon while I was reviewing Mark's notes for loopholes or patterns. My phone rang. I saw the name and felt my stomach sink. Susan Blake, attorney. I answered. John, I need to see you, right now. Her voice was tight like a violin string pulled too far. I'm coming, I said. I reached her office in 20 minutes. Her door was open, something Susan never did. She stood in the center of the room, pale. My office was broken into last night, she whispered. My heartbeat stumbled. What did they take? She looked down. Everything is untouched, except one thing. What thing? The original file of the Whitmore Family Trust. I felt the world tilt. What about the cameras? Susan swallowed. The building cameras caught part of it. At 2:11 a.m., a woman dressed in black gloves cap using the stairwell. Face visible numb. But her build, her height. John, she looked very much like Vivian Brooks. The room rang with silence. Who turned off the 5th floor cameras? I asked. Susan handed me a USB stick. That's what Mark needs to see. We found a 15-minute blackout window. 2 months ago, the black SUV watched my house for 3 minutes. Now, the cameras went dark for 15. Same pattern, same precision. A watcher, a tactician, a planner who knew legal procedure, building systems, timing. Only one person fit. Vivian. How the cameras went dark. That evening, Mark came to my house. He held a cup of coffee, but his hand was steady as always. He plugged the USB into his laptop, ran kernel logs, voltage drop analysis, signal interruption review. 3 minutes later, Mark said, as I thought, John, this wasn't hacked. The cameras were shut off manually. Someone accessed the building's electrical room, bribed the maintenance worker to unlock the panel, cut the feed to the 5th floor for precisely 15 minutes, then restored it. He slid another page across the table. Maintenance worker, Christopher Dawson. Recent transaction, $2,500 via Zelle sender. Brooks Asset Holdings, LLC. A silence fell between us. A heavy, suffocating silence. Mark broke it. "John, anyone who can pay to shut down cameras, break into a law office, and know exactly which file to take isn't working alone." I looked at him, voice barely above a whisper. "What do you think they're after inside the trust file?" Mark didn't hesitate. "Anything proving Emily's legitimate inheritance. Enough to forge access. Or enough to destroy evidence." I felt something collapse inside my chest. If they destroyed the original trust documents, Emily could lose everything. Or worse, become trapped in a legal nightmare she didn't even know existed. The truth I didn't want. That night I stood alone by the living room window. Seattle lights shimmered against the glass. Calm, beautiful, but underneath the quiet. A truth I could no longer deny: Ryan wasn't the threat alone. Vivian wasn't simply the mastermind. They were an operation, a family built on manipulation and financial predation, a machine that had chewed through people long before Emily. And I, an aging engineer with nothing but stubborn decency, was the only thing standing between them and $19 million. I heard James's voice in my mind, his final warning inside that old envelope. If you reveal the truth too soon, they will come. And now, I understood completely. They had come. And they didn't just want the money. They wanted to erase anything or anyone in the way of getting it, including me. There are people who enter your life like a storm, and then there are people who arrive like a gentle breeze, yet leave more destruction than any storm ever could. Vivian Brooks was the second kind. In August 2024, she chose the meeting place, not a fancy restaurant, not a discreet office. She picked a small cafe on the Lake Union waterfront where warm amber lights shimmered across the water, and the only sound was the distant hum of passing boats. A place so peaceful it made you forget that peace is the easiest place to hide a crime. But that is the mistake people always make: the quieter the setting, the louder the conspiracy behind it. I arrived 5 minutes early. Vivian was already there, sitting by the window. Deep red coat. One manicured hand on her cappuccino, as if she were warming it with the quiet power she always carried. She looked up, lips curving just slightly, polite enough for strangers, sharp enough for rivals. "John, you're here." I sat down. "What do you want?" Vivian gently set her cup aside. Her voice was soft as silk, but the content was sharp as a scalpel. "We're both practical people. We both care about Emily. Isn't that right?" I said nothing. I would not walk into her linguistic traps. Vivian continued smoothly. "June has passed. Emily is 30 now, which means the Whitmore Trust has opened." I met her gaze head on. "You say that as if you don't know only the heir has access." Vivian tilted her head, a smile that held more calculation than warmth. "That's exactly why I invited you here, John." She tapped 2 fingers lightly on the table like a musician testing tempo before performing something cruel. "I'll be direct," she said. "Give me a portion of that money, and you will have a peaceful retirement." I stared at her, not in shock, but in the quiet disbelief reserved for someone who has completely lost their moral compass and doesn't even know it. She wasn't joking. Her eyes weren't joking. Her smile wasn't joking. Vivian Brooks, former political PR strategist, was asking me to betray James Whitmore in exchange for a peaceful old age. I asked how much. Vivian answered without blinking. "Not much. Just 40%. I let out a single low laugh. A laugh with no humor in it. "You think I'd betray James?" Vivian leaned forward. "You think you have a choice?" That sentence was not a threat. It was an instruction wrapped in silk. "I'm not asking for everything," she continued. "Ryan and Emily are young. They need a strong start. But you and I both know Emily can't manage $19 million. And you, well, you're getting old." My fist tightened under the table. "James chose someone worthy," I said slowly, deliberately. "Not someone calculating. For the first time, her smile faltered. Not fully. Just enough for me to see the edge of her irritation, the one thing she never wanted anyone to see. "You're mistaken," she said coldly. "James didn't choose you. You're just a lockbox." I didn't react. The more arrogant the enemy, the more they reveal. "Every lock has a key," she added, "and I will find yours. Don't make me take stronger measures." She didn't need to explain what stronger measures meant. It wasn't about me. It was about Emily. Vivian stood collecting her coat like she'd just wrapped up a perfectly civil business meeting. No rush, no guilt, no second guessing. People like Vivian never look back. They only look forward toward the victory they believe is already theirs. When I left the cafe, my phone buzzed. A message from Mark Jensen John. "I have something you need to hear. Don't listen at home. Sit in your car. Lock the doors." I got into the car, locked. It turned on the AC to drown out my own heartbeat. A single audio file waited. I pressed play. Mark's voice came first. "This recording came from a source you don't need to know about. Just listen." The audio shifted. Ryan's voice, and the first sentence made my lungs collapse. "Once we get the money, we'll divorce her." A soft laugh followed. Not Ryan's. "Vivian, don't rush," she said calmly. "A sudden divorce will raise questions. Let her believe she's loved. Then we get POA. Then we move the money. Then we discard her." Ryan asked, "What about John?" Vivian replied with a coldness I didn't know humans could produce. "John. He's just the last fence. Once the fence collapses, the money flows our way." I shut the recording off. I couldn't hear another second. Both my hands gripped the steering wheel. My head lowered. My breath fogged the windshield. Not because I was weak, but because I had never heard someone speak about my daughter the way you speak about a used item you're ready to throw away. That night I sat in my dark study. No lights. Only the distant glow of street lamps bleeding through the window. I thought about Emily, the little girl who once held my hand on her first day of school. I thought about Linda, my wife, who would have fought to her last breath to protect our daughter. And I thought about James, the man who tried to warn me in his letter. If you reveal the truth too soon, they will come. But he never told me the most important part. He never told me how far they were willing to go. I replayed the sentence in my mind. "Once we get the money, we'll divorce her." I closed my eyes. No more doubt. No more hesitation. No more hoping this was all a misunderstanding. This wasn't a bad marriage. This wasn't greed. This wasn't a mistake. This was organized crime. And I, John Whitaker, 67 years old, could not stand outside the battlefield anymore. Because when a father hears his daughter being planned, priced, and prepared for disposal, the power game ends, and the real war begins. There are days when justice enters a courtroom with the bang of a gavel, and there are days when it enters in utter silence, like a storm building behind closed doors, waiting for the perfect second to destroy everything in its path. September 12, 2024 was one of those days. King County Courthouse was packed. Reporters shoulder to shoulder. Cameras lined the hallway like rifles ready for war. Every seat in the gallery filled. Emily and I sat on the second row, surrounded by strangers but united by one thing. Every pair of eyes pointed toward the defendant's table, Ryan Brooks and his mother Vivian. They arrived early, Ryan in a gray suit wearing a knife-thin smile, Vivian in a deep red coat, the kind of red worn by people who believe power can hide their sins. They didn't look like criminals. They looked like two people who believed no expected victory. The Brooks attorney began. A silver-haired man with a polished voice, a rehearsed smile, and the smug confidence of someone who thinks he holds all the winning cards. Your Honor, we submit the voluntary transfer of assets from Mrs. Emily Brooks to her husband. He lifted a thick stack of documents. Asset Transfer Authorization Spousal POA. Voluntary Marriage-Based Financial Consolidation Agreement, all bearing Emily's signature. I looked at my daughter. Her hands were shaking, her breath unsteady. She gripped my arm like a drowning person clinging to a bridge rail. The attorney continued. Mrs. Brooks willingly transferred 50% of her future assets to her husband, including inheritance. He placed the documents down like laying a blade across someone's throat. Ryan smirked. Vivian sat still, eyes sharp, predator sharp. The attorney turned to the judge. We request the court recognize these transfers as valid. A low wave of murmurs filled the room. If approved, Ryan would gain control of half the Whitmore Trust. And everyone knew that was only the beginning. Then Elena Vasquez stood our attorney. No stack of papers, no theatrics, no rush. She stepped into the center of the courtroom, her voice calm, clear, and strong enough to silence 100 whispers. Your Honor, we object. The judge tapped her gavel lightly. Basis. Elena held up a small USB. We submit an audio recording and an independent forensic report. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Ryan turned, the first flicker of fear crossing his face. Elena inserted the USB. The speakers crackled. Then Ryan's voice filled the room. Not the polished voice he used in court. Not the charming tone he used with Emily. But the voice from that drunken June night, the night Emily signed something she didn't remember. She doesn't even know what she signed. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Elena spoke evenly. And here is the second recording. A click. New audio. Ryan's voice. Once we get the money. Vivian's voice, smooth, cold, clinical. We'll divorce her. The air left the room. Not a whisper, not a cough, not a breath. Elena stood tall. Your Honor, this is not marriage. This is not transfer. This is not financial consolidation. She gripped the podium. This is a coordinated financial fraud. Vivian blanched. Ryan clenched his jaw, eyes darting side to side. Elena lifted another document. A signature analysis shows that 8 of the 9 signatures on the defendant's documents were copied and pasted from Emily's hospital intake forms. The Brooks attorney shot up. Objection. These claims cannot be. Elena raised a hand. We can prove it. She displayed the final page, a pixel-based vector comparison chart. The pixel distortion matches. The stroke patterns match. The alignment errors match. These are not handwritten signatures. They are scanned images digitally pasted. For the first time, the judge frowned. The tide shifted. Ryan leaned toward Vivian, a tiny, desperate gesture, as if asking, What do we do now? No plan. Vivian said nothing. Absolutely nothing. Her silence was louder than any scream. The judge opened her mouth to call a recess, but the courtroom doors burst open. 3 people entered. 2 judicial marshals, and between them a woman in a black blazer with a badge gleaming on her lapel. The district attorney. Gasps rippled across the room. Vivian hissed, What is this? The DA stepped forward, placing a folder on the judge's bench. Your Honor, the King County District Attorney's Office is opening a criminal case against Ryan Brooks and Vivian Brooks. Ryan shot up. What? The DA continued, voice hard as steel charges. Notary fraud, identity theft. Attempted financial exploitation. The courtroom held its breath. Execute the warrants. Ryan stumbled backward, hands shaking. This is a civil court. You can't arrest me here. The DA stepped closer. You're correct. Civil court cannot arrest you. She paused. But criminal warrants can be executed anywhere. The marshals approached. Ryan backed into the defendant's table, panic rising. Mom, say something. Vivian shot to her feet. This is unlawful. My attorney. The DA cut her off. We have your voice on tape. The old man won't live long enough to stop us. The court has already heard it. My blood froze. That was the part of the recording I hadn't heard yet. Ryan lunged, but the marshals secured his wrists. The metallic click of the handcuffs echoed like a thunderclap. He thrashed. Emily. Emily, say something. Tell them you signed it. Emily covered her face. Her sobs filled the courtroom. She couldn't speak. She couldn't look at him. Ryan was dragged toward the doors, shouting cursing pleading in a single breath. Vivian's mask finally shattered. Her eyes, once sharp, cold, calculating, went hollow. Empty. The DA gave me a single subtle nod, as if to say, this isn't over. But today, justice arrived. Outside, rain began to fall. Soft at first, then harder, until it matched the night Emily called me crying in the storm. The courtroom was still. No applause, no cheers. Just the heavy, profound quiet that follows the fall of something wicked. I took Emily's shaking hand. You're safe now, I whispered. But deep inside, I knew the truth. The war wasn't over. Ryan was simply the first to fall. Vivian Brooks was the real storm. There are people who walk through a city believing they are the biggest storm in the room, until the spotlight hits them and exposes every speck of dust they buried in the dark. October 2024 was that month for Vivian Brooks, the woman who once entered boardrooms like a queen, but now sat under studio lights looking like someone about to sink with her own ship. That morning, Seattle was wrapped in thick fog. I turned on Northwest Today while waiting for my coffee, and there she was. Vivian Brooks sat in the middle of the studio, red coat, golden hair styled to perfection, as if this wasn't the same week her son had been charged with 3 criminal offenses. She smiled weakly at the host, her lips pale yet still carrying the poise of a woman who once controlled public opinion with nothing but a cleverly crafted sentence. The host began, "Ladies and gentlemen, today we have Mrs. Vivian Brooks to address the scandal surrounding her son." Vivian nodded softly, placing her hand on her chest like an actress playing the role of sorrowful mother in a cheap afternoon soap opera. I just want to protect my son," she said, her voice trembling just enough. "Ryan is a good boy. He's been misunderstood. We never intended to do anything wrong." I stepped closer to the screen. Those weren't real tears. They sparkled too cleanly. Glycerin, the oldest trick in political PR. My phone lit up. "Mark John, look at her mascara. That's not real crying. I've seen it 100 times. Vivian dabbed her eyes carefully, not smudging a single stroke of mascara. The studio looked sympathetic. For a moment it seemed her performance might work. But then, the host smiled. A strange smile. The kind someone wears right before delivering the finishing blow. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, "you're saying you never intended to profit off your daughter-in-law." Vivian blinked quickly. "Of course not. I would never," the host signaled, and the massive screen behind her lit up. Silence fell so sharply I could hear the studio lights humming. A video played. Vivian Brooks in a conference room, her voice crystal clear, her tone cold and strategic. "We'll sell the house once we secure the inheritance." Vivian froze. Her face drained of color, as if every drop of blood had been sucked out at once. The host continued. "This is a real recording from an independent source. It was provided to us this morning. I knew the source." "Mark." Vivian stuttered, That's not me. It's been edited." The host played it again, this time in slow motion. Zoomed in. Audio spectrum matched. There was no escape. It was her. Her voice, her plan. The studio stayed silent for 5 full seconds, the longest 5 seconds of her life. Then whispers erupted. Another guest murmured, "You said you were trying to protect your son, but this sounds like you were orchestrating a financial scheme against your daughter-in-law." Vivian's hand trembled. The tissue crumpled in her fist. "It's a misunderstanding," she whispered. The host asked the final question, the one that shattered the last piece of her reputation. "Do you have anything you want to say to Emily Whitaker?" The young woman who believed she was part of your family. Vivian inhaled sharply. Her eyes filled with fury, not regret. She was never family to me. The words slipped out. Too fast, too raw, too honest. The studio exploded. Gasps, whispers, shocked expressions. And just like that, Vivian destroyed herself on live television. She left the studio surrounded by a swarm of reporters. Flashes exploded around her. Microphones hit her shoulder. Questions fired from every direction. Did you manipulate Emily? Did you forge the POA? Did you intend to steal the Whitmore Trust? Is this part of a wider scam? Vivian covered her face. Her lipstick smeared. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her hair blown wild by the Seattle wind. She was no longer the PR queen. She was just a defeated woman running from the truth. Someone in the crowd shouted, 20 years of lies, Vivian. This is your payback. Vivian stopped dead in the parking lot. Turned back. Her eyes red furious, burning. She whispered just loud enough for the cameras to catch, you don't know everything. Then she climbed into her car and slammed the door so hard the window shook. That evening, Mark came to my house. He placed a thick envelope on my table. I finally know why Vivian hates James Whitmore, he said. I opened it. Inside minutes from a Whitmore Holdings meeting in 2004, an investment proposal from a tiny firm, internal memos, and a final page stamped red, declined, risk too high. The firm's name, Brooks Strategic Concepts founder, Vivian Brooks. I looked up. What is this? Mark took a seat. This was Vivian's pitch to James 20 years ago. She asked for a $2 million investment, and James rejected her. Mark nodded. And the fallout ruined her. Her firm collapsed. She lost her investors. Her career in PR declined. I turned to the last page. James's handwritten note. Low vision, high risk, weak ethics. Mark leaned back. This is a 20-year grudge. She didn't just want Emily's money. She wanted to destroy everything connected to James. I closed my eyes. And suddenly, everything aligned. Vivian's hatred, her obsession, the stalking, the forged documents, her mentoring of Ryan, the POA scams, the surveillance, the break-in, the lies, the performance. It wasn't just greed. It was revenge. On a man who rejected her 2 decades ago, on his daughter, on his granddaughter, on his legacy. Mark exhaled. John, today was Ryan's downfall. Tomorrow, it will be Vivian's. I stood in the window watching Seattle's lights shimmer across the black lake. Wind howled. The city roared. But inside me was a stillness born of grim clarity. Sometimes the fall of a wicked person doesn't come from a courtroom. It comes from their own mouth the moment they believe they're smarter than everyone else. On the TV, Vivian's smeared mascara replayed over and over. Mark asked quietly, "What do you think she'll do next?" I answered, voice low, steady as cold rain. Vivian doesn't surrender. She retaliates. And I need to be ready. On screen, the host of Northwest Today ended with a simple line. When justice knocks, no one escapes. I turned off the TV and prepared for the storm that was coming. There are some metal doors in life that lock away more than valuables. They lock away fears, promises, and wounds we never dared to face. My safe was one of those doors. And on a cold afternoon in late November 2024, after the trial, after the audio recordings, after Vivian's fall on live television, I knew it was finally time to open it. There was no avoiding it anymore. Emily sat on the sofa holding a cup of hot tea she didn't drink. She had just come home from work, coat still on, shoulders slumped. Her face was puffy, the way someone looks after too many sleepless nights filled with trials, betrayal, and questions she had never dared to ask until now. Why did all of this happen, Dad? Her voice was small. Not the voice of a 30-year-old woman who survived a toxic marriage. It was the voice of a little girl 5 years old again, trying to understand the dark. I didn't answer immediately. I stood and walked to my office. The wooden door creaked softly, carrying the faint scent of pine resin, the scent my late wife loved so much. I knelt down, lifted the floorboard, and there it was, a steel lock with 3 layers. A code, a mechanical dial, a backup key. I entered the code. Each metallic click sounded like a countdown. Then I turned the dial. Slow, precise. The safe opened, not with a dramatic clang, but with the tired exhale of old metal giving way after holding a secret for too long. Emily stood behind me. I didn't hear her steps, but I could feel her trembling. Inside the safe were only 2 things: a large yellow envelope, a smaller, older envelope worn along the edges. I picked up the smaller one. Then I turned to my daughter. "Emily," I said softly, "this is the truth I've been keeping from you." We sat at the kitchen table. I placed the envelope in front of her. "Your grandfather left this for me," I told her, "and he asked me to give it to you. Only when you needed it." Emily opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter paper, slightly yellowed, ink still strong, written in James Whitmore's firm, unwavering handwriting. She read, line by line, word by word. "Dear John, if you are reading this, it means you have protected something I could not. Loyalty. Do not believe that everyone around Emily is a friend. Some have watched this family's wealth for years. Protect her, even if she grows angry, even if she thinks you have betrayed her, even if it breaks your heart to stay silent. A father must choose the path that hurts him, to save the child who cannot see it yet." Emily put the letter down. She didn't speak. Her throat moved, trying to swallow the pain, the truth, the realization. Then she whispered a single question, barely audible. "Dad, why did you hide this from me?" I turned my old wedding ring on my finger, a habit I hadn't fallen into since my wife died. "Emily," I said, each word heavy as stone, because hiding it was better than watching you be sold. She looked up. Her eyes shattered, not with anger, not with shock, but with understanding. Understanding that arrived too late, but settled deep into her bones. "Do you know why I never told you about the 19 million I asked?" She shook her head. "Because if I had, you would have trusted Ryan." I slid the larger envelope toward her. "And if you had trusted him, this money, this legacy would have become a trap." She stared at the envelope. Her voice cracked. "Did you think I wouldn't believe you? Did you think I'd choose him over you?" "No," I said quietly. "I trusted you. But I didn't trust the people standing around you." 2 tears fell onto her hands, and for the first time since the trial, I watched her break down. Not from heartbreak, but from release. I opened the large envelope. The original will. Not a scan, not a copy. The real document, Whitmore's red seal, James's signature, Susan's legal certification. I handed it to her. "This is the truth," I said gently. "Not because you married the wrong man, not because you were foolish, but because James knew something we never wanted to believe. Money can turn strangers into family, and family into strangers." Emily read silently. Her shoulders shook. Then her voice came out in pieces, like something fragile trying to become whole again. "You've carried this alone. For a whole year." I looked at her, really looked at her. "Not alone," I said. "I had your mother. I had James. And I had you, even when you didn't know it. And then something happened I didn't expect." Emily stood up. She walked around the table. And she hugged me. Not the polite kind. Not the "I'm sorry" kind. But the deep, trembling, heartbroken hug of a daughter who finally understood what her father had been doing in the dark, while she fought shadows she couldn't see. Through her tears, she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Dad, for not seeing sooner. For trusting the wrong person, for not asking you before everything fell apart." I placed my hand on her back. None of this is your fault, I whispered. Some people spend their whole lives deceiving others. You spent 1 year escaping them. You are stronger than you think. Later that night, after she went to bed, I sat alone beside the open safe. The empty space where the envelopes once lay felt like a chapter that had finally ended. And I realized something. Some secrets exist not to hide the truth, but to protect it. Some promises are kept not to deceive, but to save. James had been right. I didn't know who was circling Emily back then, not until Ryan stepped through my door. And now, with the iron door finally open with every truth laid bare before her. I understood truth sets us free, but it makes us bleed first. I closed the safe, locked it, not to hide anything anymore, but because the things that needed revealing were finally revealed. Christmas came quietly that year. No loud music, no flashing lights, no crowd. Just a small table, 2 candles, a few simple dishes, and the kind of warm, steady breathing that fills a house when peace finally returns after a storm. Outside, the snow fell in thin, gentle layers stacking on top of each other. The same way memories stack, the ones we protect, the ones we hide, the ones we keep alive even when they hurt. Across the table, Emily looked at me. There was no fear in her eyes anymore. No tremor from the nightmare months behind her. Only a quiet steadiness, the kind that comes after survival. She set her fork down so softly the metal didn't even make a sound. "Dad." Her voice was careful, as if she were stepping onto a frozen lake. "If you had told me everything from the beginning, would things have gone differently?" I placed my knife down. The faint tap against the wooden table sounded tiny, but in that room it felt like thunder. Conversation stopped. The air thickened as if 3 more winters had rolled into the house all at once. I looked at my daughter, not avoiding, not defending myself, just offering the truth bare and cold as the snow outside. She sat up straight, her fingers interlaced tightly. "I keep thinking," she whispered, "that if I had known, if I had understood, I wouldn't have married him." I nodded. "Maybe. Just maybe." She gave a small, wounded smile. I tilted my head. "Emily, the people who hide the truth are usually the ones trying to control it. But I hid it, because I was trying to keep you safe." She swallowed hard, her eyes turning red. I took a breath, the kind you take before walking back into a memory that cut you once already. "You have $19 million waiting for you," I said softly. The whole table went silent. Wind slipped through the window seam, a thin, shivering sound. I hid it. I continued, because if I hadn't, 1 month after meeting Ryan, you would have lost your entire life. Emily's eyes closed. 2 tears fell. "You saved me." Her hand trembled as she covered her mouth. "Even when I thought you just hated Ryan." I reached out, touched her hand. "I never hated him," I said quietly. I paused. "I just saw something you weren't able to see." Not because she was naive, not because she was weak, but because some people spend their whole lives perfecting the art of deception. She had only known him for a year. One of her uncles cleared his throat. "So how long did you keep all this from her?" I looked toward the window. Snow was falling thicker now, white heavy, covering the world in a way that made it feel distant, muted. "For how long?" I repeated softly. "As early as the day of her grandfather's funeral." Emily turned toward me sharply. "Dad, you knew back then?" I nodded. "That was the day I received the envelope from James, the one that said, 'If you tell her too early, they will come.' And that was also the day I saw Vivian standing in the rain in that red coat, and knew she wasn't there to grieve." Emily pressed both hands to her mouth. "And you carried all of this alone?" For a whole year I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She knew. Emily stood up and walked to the window. She didn't cry loudly. She didn't fall apart. She just stood there, watching her breath fog the cold glass. Quiet. Hurt. Understanding. I always thought, she said softly, you disliked Ryan because you were lonely or old-fashioned or too strict. I shook my head. No, I disliked him because I've seen men who look at a woman and see nothing but a check waiting to clear. Emily turned, walked back to me, and leaned down, wrapping her arms around me in a way that held all her past misunderstandings and all her new truths. I'm sorry, she whispered into my shoulder, for not seeing, for trusting the wrong person, for leaving you to fight alone. I placed my hand on her head, stroking gently the same way I did when she was small. You don't owe me an apology, I murmured. You were a good person. They were people who knew how to plant poison. Karma didn't need a weapon. It didn't need revenge plots. It didn't need destruction. Karma only needed time. Ryan was sitting in a county jail waiting for a federal indictment. Vivian had lost everything, her reputation, her network, her company. Brooke's asset holdings was frozen. Every account under investigation. I hadn't done any of that. The truth had simply come to light, and the light was bright enough to burn everything they tried to hide. Emily returned to her seat beside me, her hand still on mine. Dad, she whispered, barely holding her voice together, if it weren't for you, I would have lost my freedom. And my soul. I looked into her tear-filled eyes, the eyes I had spent a year protecting at all costs. And I finally spoke the words I had been carrying in my chest since the beginning. A confession and a prayer. Thank God I hid it. I exhaled slowly, because if I hadn't, I held her gaze. You wouldn't be yourself anymore. Emily hugged me again, tighter, warmer, truer than before. And there, in the quiet mix of wind, snow, and steady breathing, I felt a dark chapter of our life close. Not with a gavel, not with handcuffs, not with vengeance, but with a peaceful Christmas dinner and a confession that saved an entire life. If you made it all the way here, you didn't just watch this story, you felt it. You lived pieces of it. Maybe in your home, maybe in your past, maybe in the quiet places of your heart you don't talk about. So before you go, I want to ask you, did this story touch anything real in you? Tell me in the comments. Your voice matters more than you think. Have you ever protected someone? At a cost only you understood. Share your strength. Another woman out there needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories where karma arrives quietly, beautifully, and on time, hit like, tap subscribe, and turn on the little bell. Not for me, but for the next woman who needs a reminder that age doesn't make you weaker. Experience makes you unstoppable, and no one gets away with hurting a good heart forever. You being here means more than you know. Stay safe, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.